The sun was setting over the quiet streets of Meadowbrook as Colonel Marcus Hayes turned onto Elm Street. He had just finished a long day at Fort Carson Military Base. His uniform jacket hung neatly on a hanger in the back seat. The radio played soft jazz music as he drove his black sedan through the neighborhood where he had lived for the past 3 years. Marcus used his turn signal and changed lanes. He was only 2 blocks from home. His wife Sarah was making dinner. Their daughter was visiting from college for the weekend. Marcus smiled thinking about seeing his family. It had been a good day at the base. His soldiers were training well. Everything felt peaceful. Then he saw the flashing red and blue lights in his rearview mirror. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He had done nothing wrong. He was not speeding. He had used his turn signal. His registration was current. His inspection sticker was valid. But he knew this feeling well. As a black man in America, even a decorated Army colonel, traffic stops always brought a sense of worry. He pulled over to the side of the road carefully. He turned off the engine. He placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen clearly. He had taught his own son these same rules years ago. Stay calm, be respectful. Keep your hands visible. Do not make sudden movements. Follow instructions exactly. The police car stopped behind him. Marcus watched in his side mirror as a white officer stepped out. The officer was in his early 30s with short blonde hair. His name tag read Walsh. Officer Derek Walsh walked toward Marcus's car with his hand resting on his gun belt. His face showed no emotion. Marcus rolled down his window as the officer approached. "License and registration," Walsh said. His voice was cold and hard. There was no greeting, no explanation for the stop. "Good evening, officer," Marcus said calmly. "May I ask why you pulled me over?" Walsh's eyes narrowed. "I said license and registration now." Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. I am reaching for my wallet now. It is in my back pocket." He moved his hand carefully and slowly pulled out his wallet. He removed his driver's license. Then he reached toward the glove compartment. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Walsh shouted suddenly. His hand moved closer to his gun. Marcus froze. His heart pounded in his chest. "I am getting my registration from the glove compartment," he said clearly. "Is that okay?" Walsh stared at him for a long moment. "Make it slow." Marcus opened the glove compartment slowly. He pulled out the registration and insurance papers. He handed everything to Walsh through the window. His military ID was clipped to his license. It clearly showed his rank. Colonel, United States Army, 22 years of service. Walsh looked at the documents. His eyes passed over the military ID without any sign of recognition or respect. "You failed to signal back there," he said. Marcus kept his voice calm and respectful. "I apologize if it was not clear, officer, but I did use my turn signal." "I always do." "Are you calling me a liar?" Walsh's voice rose with anger. "No, sir. Not at all. I am just saying that I did signal." Walsh leaned closer to the window. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "I live here. My house is 2 blocks from here on Maple Street." "This your car?" Walsh asked, looking at the vehicle with suspicion. "Yes, sir. It is registered in my name. You can see that on the registration." Walsh studied the registration again. Then he looked back at Marcus. "This is a nice car. A nice neighborhood. How does someone like you afford a car like this?" Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his face calm. "Someone like you." The words hung in the air like poison. "I am a colonel in the United States Army," Marcus said quietly. "I have served my country for 22 years, Walsh laughed. It was not a friendly laugh. "Sure you are. And I am the president." He tapped the military ID with his finger. "These are easy to fake. Where did you really get this car?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Officer Walsh, that ID is not fake. You can call Fort Carson and verify my identity. My commanding officer is Major General Robert Thompson. I command the 3rd Battalion." "Step out of the vehicle," Walsh ordered suddenly. "Why?" "What have I done wrong?" "I said step out of the vehicle, now." Walsh's hand was on his gun again. Marcus knew he had no choice. He unbuckled his seatbelt slowly. He opened the door and stepped out onto the street. He kept his hands visible at all times. A few neighbors had come out onto their porches. Some were watching. One woman across the street had her phone out. "Turn around." "Put your hands on the car," Walsh commanded. Marcus did as he was told. He placed his hands flat on the roof of his car. Walsh kicked his feet apart roughly. Then he began to pat him down aggressively. The search was not professional. It was rough and meant to humiliate. "What are you looking for?" Marcus asked. "Drugs, weapons, stolen goods, whatever someone like you is hiding." An elderly white woman came out of the house next door. "Officer, that is Colonel Hayes," she called out. "He lives right down the street. He is our neighbor." Walsh ignored her completely. "You got any drugs in the car?" Walsh asked Marcus. "No, sir. I do not use drugs. I am subject to regular military drug testing." Walsh walked around to the driver's side door. "I am going to search your vehicle. Do you have probable cause?" Marcus asked carefully. "I have done nothing illegal." Walsh spun around. His face was red with anger. "I smell marijuana. That is probable cause. There is no marijuana in my car. I do not smoke marijuana. We will see about that." Walsh leaned into the car and began searching. He pulled out the gym bag from the passenger seat and dumped it on the ground. Workout clothes and sneakers fell onto the street. He opened the glove compartment and scattered papers everywhere. He pulled up the floor mats. He looked under the seats. Marcus stood with his hand still on the car, watching his belongings scattered on the ground. More neighbors had come outside now. Several were recording with their phones. A teenage boy across the street had his phone pointed directly at the scene. Walsh found nothing. No drugs, no weapons, nothing illegal at all. But his face showed no embarrassment or apology. Instead, he looked more angry. "Why are you being so difficult?" Walsh asked. Marcus turned his head slightly. "I have been nothing but cooperative, officer. I have followed every instruction you have given me." "You have been resistant and suspicious from the start," Walsh said. He pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Walsh. I need backup at Elm and 3rd Street. I have a suspicious person refusing to comply with instructions." Marcus's eyes widened. "That is not true. I have complied with everything." But Walsh was not listening. He was watching Marcus with cold eyes, waiting for his backup to arrive. The sun had set completely now. Streetlights flickered on. Neighbors watched from their porches and yards. Phones continued to record. And Marcus Hayes, a decorated colonel who had served his country with honor for more than 2 decades, stood with his hands on his own car in his own neighborhood, knowing that nothing he said or did would matter to the officer, who had already decided he was guilty of something. 2 more police cars arrived within minutes. The flashing lights painted the quiet street in red and blue. Officer Walsh stood near Marcus with his arms crossed, looking satisfied that backup had arrived. Marcus remained standing beside his car with his hands visible, his heart beating fast but his face calm. 2 officers stepped out of their vehicles. One was a younger Hispanic officer named Rodriguez. The other was an older white officer named Patterson. They walked over to Walsh, who spoke to them in low voices. Marcus could not hear what they were saying, but he saw Walsh pointing at him and shaking his head. Rodriguez approached Marcus first. His expression was more neutral than Walsh's had been. "Sir, can you tell me what is happening here?" Marcus spoke clearly and calmly. "Officer, my name is Colonel Marcus Hayes. I live 2 blocks from here on Maple Street. Officer Walsh pulled me over, but I am not sure why. He said I failed to signal, but I did signal. He searched my car without finding anything illegal. I have been cooperative with every instruction. I am a colonel in the United States Army stationed at Fort Carson." Rodriguez looked at Marcus's military uniform jacket hanging in the back seat. He glanced at Walsh, then back at Marcus. "Do you have identification?" "Officer Walsh has my license and military ID. He has had them for about 15 minutes now." Rodriguez walked back to Walsh. Marcus watched as they talked. Patterson joined them. The 3 officers stood in a circle discussing something. Marcus could see Rodriguez gesturing toward him, then toward the neighbors who were watching. Several people were still recording with their phones. The woman from next door was talking to another neighbor, both looking worried. Walsh's voice suddenly rose loud enough for everyone to hear. "I do not care what he says he is. He was being resistant and suspicious. He matches the description of someone reported in the area." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Now there was a mysterious report. A description he somehow matched. This was getting worse. Rodriguez came back to Marcus. "Colonel Hayes, is there someone we can call to verify your identity?" "Yes," Marcus said, relieved that at least one officer seemed willing to listen. "You can call Fort Carson and ask for Major General Robert Thompson. He is my commanding officer. Or you can call my wife, Dr. Sarah Hayes. She works at Mercy Hospital. Her number is programmed in my phone, which is in the cup holder of my car. Rodriguez nodded and went to look for the phone. Walsh immediately stepped forward and blocked his path. We are not making calls based on what he tells us, Walsh said firmly. This man is clearly hiding something. He got nervous when I asked about the car. He was evasive with his answers. Marcus could not stay silent anymore. That is completely untrue. I answered every question you asked. I provided my identification immediately. I told you exactly where I live and who I am. See? Walsh pointed at Marcus. Hostile. Aggressive. This is exactly what I was talking about. Patterson finally spoke. He was older and his voice carried authority. Derek, I watched the dashcam footage on your vehicle while we were driving over. The man signaled clearly. I saw it. Walsh's face reddened. Then maybe your eyes are not as good as they used to be, Patterson. An uncomfortable silence fell over the officers. Patterson's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. Marcus saw his chance. Officers, please. My wife is expecting me home. My daughter is visiting from college. I have done nothing wrong. You have searched my car and found nothing illegal. I have been respectful and cooperative. What exactly am I being detained for? Walsh stepped closer to Marcus. His eyes were cold. You want to know what you are being detained for? Resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, and I think we can add impersonating a military officer to that list. Marcus felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Impersonating? My ID is real. You can verify it with one phone call. Those IDs can be bought online, Walsh said, and you certainly do not act like any officer I have ever met. Real officers respect law enforcement. I do respect law enforcement, Marcus said, his voice strained with the effort to stay calm. I have worked with military police for 2 decades. I have nothing but respect for officers who do their jobs properly and treat people with dignity. The implied criticism was not lost on Walsh. His face turned darker red. That is it. Turn around. You are under arrest. For what? Marcus asked, his voice rising despite his efforts to stay calm. I have committed no crime. Turn around now or we will add resisting to the charges, Walsh said, pulling out his handcuffs. Rodriguez stepped forward. Derek, maybe we should... Stay out of this, Rodriguez, Walsh snapped. This is my stop. My call. Marcus looked at the other officers, hoping one of them would step in. Patterson looked uncomfortable but remained silent. Rodriguez looked conflicted, his hand rubbing the back of his neck. The neighbors were closer now. The elderly woman from next door was on her phone, speaking urgently to someone. The teenage boy was still recording, his phone held high to capture everything. A middle-aged man in a suit had joined the growing crowd. He was also recording. This is wrong, the man in the suit called out. We all know Marcus. He is a colonel. He lives here. This is his neighborhood. Walsh ignored them all. Colonel Hayes, turn around and put your hands behind your back. This is your last warning. Marcus knew he had no choice. If he did not comply now, things would only get worse. He could be hurt. He could be shot. He had seen the news too many times. He knew how these situations could end for black men, even innocent ones. Even decorated military officers. He turned around slowly. He placed his hands behind his back. Walsh grabbed his wrists roughly and snapped the handcuffs on tight. Too tight. The metal bit into Marcus's skin. Marcus winced but said nothing. You have the right to remain silent, Walsh began, his voice mechanical and bored. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As Walsh read him his rights, Marcus looked at the neighbors watching. He looked at the phones recording. He kept his face calm and dignified. He would not give Walsh the satisfaction of seeing him break down. He would not shout or cry or beg. He was a United States Army colonel. He had led soldiers into combat. He had faced enemy fire. He would not be broken by one racist cop on a power trip. But inside, his heart was breaking. Inside, he felt humiliation and rage and fear all mixed together. This was America. This was his neighborhood. He had done nothing wrong. And yet here he was, being arrested in front of his neighbors, being treated like a criminal, having his dignity stripped away on a quiet street where he paid his taxes and mowed his lawn and waved hello to his neighbors every morning. Walsh pushed him toward the police car. Not gently. Marcus stumbled slightly but kept his balance. Rodriguez opened the back door of Walsh's patrol car. Patterson stood back, his face unreadable. Before they put him in the car, Marcus spoke loudly and clearly. making sure the recording phones could hear every word. My name is Colonel Marcus Hayes. I am a colonel in the United States Army. I have served my country for 22 years. I have done nothing illegal. I used my turn signal. I live 2 blocks from here on Maple Street. I have been respectful and cooperative. Officer Walsh searched my car without probable cause and found nothing illegal. I am being arrested for resisting arrest, even though I have not resisted anything. I am being arrested for disorderly conduct, even though I have been nothing but calm and polite. This is an injustice. I am innocent. Walsh shoved him into the back seat. Save your speech for the judge. The door slammed shut. Marcus sat in the back of the patrol car, handcuffed, watching as a tow truck arrived to take his car. He watched as Walsh talked to the tow truck driver, pointing at his vehicle like it was evidence of a crime instead of just a car. He watched his neighbors watching him, their faces full of shock and concern. Rodriguez came to the window. He looked troubled. Colonel Hayes, I'm sorry about this situation. We will get it sorted out at the station. Marcus looked at him. Will you? Will you really? Or will you just follow Walsh's lead like you have been doing this whole time? Rodriguez had no answer. He walked away. Patterson came to the car to take down the impound information. He did not look at Marcus. Walsh got in the driver's seat. He looked at Marcus in the rearview mirror with a smug smile. Comfortable back there, Colonel? The word Colonel dripped with sarcasm. Marcus said nothing. He had said all he needed to say. The cameras had recorded it. The neighbors had witnessed it. Now he just needed to get through the next few hours without losing his composure. The patrol car pulled away from the curb. Through the back window, Marcus watched his car being hooked up to the tow truck. He watched his neighbors standing in small groups, talking and pointing. He watched his peaceful neighborhood disappear as Walsh drove him toward the police station. He thought about Sarah waiting for him at home. He thought about his daughter expecting to see him walk through the door. He thought about the dinner getting cold on the table. He thought about having to explain to them why he was in handcuffs in the back of a police car. And he thought about every young black man who had ever told him about being stopped for no reason. Every soldier who had ever come to him with a story about being harassed by police. Every parent who had ever given their son the talk about how to survive a traffic stop. He had listened to those stories with sympathy. He had believed them. But part of him had always thought that his rank, his service, his position would protect him from such treatment. Now he knew the truth. No rank was high enough. No service was long enough. No position was safe enough. To Officer Derek Walsh, he was not a colonel. He was not a decorated veteran. He was not a man who had risked his life for his country. He was just another black man who needed to be put in his place. The police station was busy with evening activity when Walsh pulled into the parking lot. Marcus sat in the back seat, his hands still cuffed tightly behind him. The metal had left red marks on his wrists. His shoulders ached from the uncomfortable position, but he kept his face calm and his breathing steady. He would not give Walsh any more satisfaction. Walsh got out and opened the back door. He pulled Marcus out roughly by the arm. "Let's go, Colonel," he said with that same mocking tone. Marcus stepped out carefully, keeping his balance despite having no use of his hands. They walked through a side door into the station. The fluorescent lights were harsh and bright. The smell of old coffee and cleaning products filled the air. Officers moved through hallways, some carrying paperwork, others escorting people in handcuffs like Marcus. They stopped at the booking desk. A sergeant sat behind a tall counter typing on a computer. He was an older black man with gray hair and reading glasses. His nameplate read Sergeant James Wilson. He looked up as Walsh approached with Marcus. "Another arrest, Walsh?" Wilson asked, his tone neutral. "Yes, sir. Subject was stopped for failure to signal, became resistant and hostile. Found him to be highly suspicious. Arrested for resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, and suspicion of impersonating a military officer." Wilson's eyebrows rose. He looked at Marcus for the first time, really looked at him. He saw a well-dressed black man in his late 40s, standing with perfect military posture despite the handcuffs. He saw intelligence and dignity in his eyes, not the look of someone who had been causing trouble. "Impersonating a military officer?" Wilson repeated. Walsh pulled out Marcus's military ID and tossed it on the counter. "Claims to be a colonel at Fort Carson. ID looks fake to me." Wilson picked up the ID. He studied it carefully, turning it over in his hands. He looked at the hologram, the seal, the printed information. His expression changed. His eyes widened slightly. Then he looked at Marcus again, this time with recognition and growing concern. "Sir, what is your name?" Wilson asked Marcus directly. "Colonel Marcus Hayes. 3rd Battalion, Fort Carson. 22 years of service." Wilson stood up from his chair. "Officer Walsh, this ID is not fake. This is a real military identification card. I served 12 years in the Army before joining the police force. I know what these look like." Walsh's confident expression faltered slightly. Well, maybe it is real, but he was still being resistant and suspicious. "I was not," Marcus said firmly but calmly. "I answered every question. I provided all requested documents immediately. I informed Officer Walsh multiple times of my identity and where I live. When he searched my car without probable cause, I did not physically resist, though I did state that I believed the search was improper. That is not resisting arrest. That is exercising my rights as a citizen." Wilson looked between Walsh and Marcus. "Did you find anything in the vehicle search?" Walsh shifted his weight. "No, but did the suspect physically resist when you attempted to arrest him?" "He was verbally resistant. Did he physically resist?" Wilson repeated, his voice firmer. Walsh's jaw clenched. "No, but his attitude was—" "Remove his handcuffs," Wilson ordered. "Sergeant, I do not think—" "That was not a suggestion, Officer Walsh. Remove his handcuffs now." Walsh's face turned red. He moved behind Marcus and unlocked the handcuffs roughly. The metal scraped against Marcus's wrists as they came off. Marcus brought his hands forward and rubbed his wrists where the cuffs had cut into his skin. "Colonel Hayes, I apologize for this situation," Wilson said. He came around from behind the desk. "However, since Officer Walsh has brought formal charges, we do need to process you. It is just procedure. But I want you to know that we will also be looking into the circumstances of your arrest very carefully." Marcus nodded. "I understand. Thank you, Sergeant Wilson. Do you need medical attention? Those wrists look pretty bad." Marcus looked down at his wrists. They were red and swollen with marks from the tight handcuffs. "I will be fine." Wilson did not look convinced, but he nodded. "All right. Let's get you processed quickly. Officer Walsh, you can write your report. I will handle the booking from here." Walsh opened his mouth to protest, but Wilson's firm stare stopped him. Walsh turned and walked away, his boots heavy on the tile floor. Wilson took Marcus through the booking process. Fingerprints, photographs, basic information. He was professional but kind, treating Marcus with the respect his rank deserved. Other officers passing by noticed what was happening. Some did double takes when they saw Marcus being processed. Word began to spread through the station that a colonel had been arrested. "Can I make a phone call?" Marcus asked when the processing was complete. "Yes, sir. You can make 2 calls if you need them. I need to call my wife, and I would like to call my commanding officer at Fort Carson." Wilson handed him a phone. "Take your time, Colonel." Marcus dialed Sarah's number with shaking fingers. His wife answered on the second ring. "Marcus, where are you? Dinner is getting cold and Jessica has been waiting to see you." Marcus closed his eyes. Hearing her voice made everything feel more real. "Sarah, I need you to listen carefully. I have been arrested." There was a moment of shocked silence. "What, arrested? For what?" "A police officer pulled me over 2 blocks from home. He arrested me for resisting arrest and disorderly conduct, even though I did neither. I am at the Meadowbrook police station. I need you to call David." David Chen was their lawyer, a good friend who had handled their wills and real estate transactions. "Oh my God. Marcus, are you okay? Did they hurt you?" "I am fine. The handcuffs were tight, but I'm okay. Just call David and tell him where I am." "Can you do that?" Yes, I am calling him right now. I am coming to the station." "Sarah, do not argue with me, Marcus Hayes. I am coming. Stay calm. I love you. I love you too." The line went dead. Marcus took a deep breath and dialed Fort Carson. He asked for Major General Thompson's office. The general's aide answered, a young lieutenant named Morrison. "This is Colonel Hayes. I need to speak with General Thompson immediately. It is urgent." "Sir, the general is in a meeting with—" "Lieutenant Morrison, I am currently under arrest at the Meadowbrook police station. I need to speak with the general right now." There was a pause. "Say again, sir? You are under arrest?" "That is correct. Now please get the general on the phone." "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." There was a click, then hold music. Marcus waited, aware that Wilson was watching him sympathetically. Other officers had gathered nearby, pretending to work but clearly listening. "Marcus," General Thompson's voice came on the line, sharp with concern. "What the hell is going on?" "Sir, I was arrested about an hour ago by a Meadowbrook police officer during a traffic stop near my home. The charges are resisting arrest and disorderly conduct. Both charges are false. I did nothing to resist. I was cooperative throughout the encounter. The officer was hostile from the beginning. He searched my car without probable cause, found nothing, and arrested me anyway. He also accused me of having a fake military ID." There was a long moment of silence. When Thompson spoke again, his voice was cold with barely controlled anger. "They arrested you? They accused you of having a fake ID? Do they know who you are?" The arresting officer did not care, sir. He was told multiple times that I am a colonel. He did not care. He mocked my service. "Give me the name of the arresting officer." "Officer Derek Walsh, Meadowbrook Police Department." "And you are at the Meadowbrook station now?" "Yes, sir. Being held pending charges. Like hell you are. I am calling the police chief right now. I am calling the mayor. I am calling every person I need to call. You sit tight, Colonel. This is going to be handled." "Sir, you want justice, Marcus, and you are going to get it. This is unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. You have served this country with honor for over 2 decades. You have led soldiers in combat. You have earned medals for bravery, and some small-town cop who does not know his ass from his elbow arrests you in your own neighborhood? No, this ends now." Marcus felt emotion rising in his throat. He swallowed it down. "Thank you, sir. Do not thank me. This is what should happen. This is what must happen. Now, have they allowed you legal representation? My wife is calling our lawyer now." "Good. Do not say anything else to anyone without your lawyer present. Not one word. Understood?" "Yes, sir. I will be making calls immediately. Sit tight, the line went dead." Marcus hung up the phone and looked at Wilson. "Thank you, Sergeant," Wilson nodded. "Colonel, I do not know what happened out there tonight, but I have been a cop for 20 years. I have seen a lot of arrests, and something about this does not sit right. Walsh has been—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Walsh has had some complaints before. Nothing that stuck. But complaints." Before Marcus could respond, there was a commotion at the front of the station. A woman's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "Where is my husband? Where is Colonel Marcus Hayes?" Sarah had arrived. She swept into the booking area like a force of nature. Dr. Sarah Hayes was a striking woman in her mid-40s, wearing scrubs from her shift at the hospital. Her natural hair was pulled back in a bun. Her dark eyes flashed with fury. Behind her came David Chen, their lawyer, carrying a briefcase and looking equally angry. "Marcus!" Sarah rushed to him. She hugged him tightly, then pulled back to look at his wrists. "Oh my God, look at your wrists. They hurt you." "I am fine," Marcus said quietly. "You are not fine. Those need to be treated." She turned to Wilson. "I am Dr. Sarah Hayes. I am an emergency physician at Mercy Hospital. My husband needs medical attention for these injuries." "Ma'am, I offered medical attention." He declined. "Well, I am not declining on his behalf. Get me a first aid kit." David stepped forward. "I am David Chen, Colonel Hayes' attorney. I need to speak with my client immediately, and I need to know the exact charges and who approved this arrest." Wilson looked overwhelmed by the sudden invasion of angry, educated, powerful people. "The charges are resisting arrest and disorderly conduct filed by Officer Walsh." "Resisting arrest for what initial crime?" David asked sharply. The initial stop was for failure to signal, a traffic violation, which typically results in a citation, not an arrest. "What prompted the escalation to arrest?" Wilson glanced toward where Walsh had disappeared. "You would have to ask Officer Walsh." "Oh, I will," David said. "Trust me, I will be asking Officer Walsh a lot of questions." Sarah finished examining Marcus's wrists. "These need ice and possibly x-rays. The handcuffs were applied too tightly. This could be nerve damage." The chief of police emerged from his office, drawn by the commotion. He was a heavy-set white man in his 50s named Robert Crawford. He looked at the scene before him with growing alarm. "What is going on here?" he asked. Everyone turned to look at him. David spoke first. "Chief Crawford, I'm attorney David Chen. I'm here representing Colonel Marcus Hayes, who was wrongfully arrested in his own neighborhood approximately 90 minutes ago. My client was cooperative throughout the encounter. He committed no crime, yet he was arrested, roughly handcuffed, causing injury, and brought here on false charges. I will be filing a formal complaint and considering a civil rights lawsuit. Crawford's face paled. His eyes landed on Marcus, taking in his bearing, his obvious intelligence, the dignity with which he stood despite everything. Colonel Hayes, I was not aware of your arrest. Let me look into this situation immediately. Behind him, they could see Walsh standing in the hallway, his confident expression now replaced with worry. He had heard everything. He knew his world was about to come crashing down. Marcus spent 18 hours in a holding cell at the Meadowbrook police station. The cell was small and cold with a metal bench and a toilet in the corner. He sat with his back straight against the concrete wall, his military training keeping him composed even in this humiliating situation. David Chen had advised him to stay overnight rather than post bail. They wanted the full impact of the injustice to be documented. Sarah had not wanted to leave him there. She had argued and protested, but Marcus convinced her to go home to their daughter Jessica. No need for Jessica to see her father behind bars. That image would stay with her forever. So Sarah left, but not before promising to come back first thing in the morning. Marcus did not sleep much that night. He thought about his soldiers at Fort Carson. He thought about all the times he had told them to respect law enforcement, to cooperate, to stay calm. He had believed those things would keep them safe. Now he knew better. Now he understood what so many black men had tried to tell him over the years. It did not matter how respectful you were. It did not matter what rank you held or how much you had sacrificed for your country. To some people, you would always be suspicious. You would always be guilty. You would always be less than human. While Marcus sat in his cell, something else was happening outside. Something that would change everything. The video started appearing online around 10 o'clock that night. The teenager who had recorded the arrest, a 17-year-old named Tyler Washington, uploaded it to several social media platforms. He titled it simply, "Racist Cop Arrests Black Colonel for No Reason in Our Neighborhood." The video was clear and well shot. It showed everything. Marcus being pulled over, Walsh approaching with aggression, Marcus being calm and respectful, Walsh searching the car and finding nothing, Marcus being handcuffed while stating clearly who he was and what was happening. The audio captured every word. Tyler also included a second video. This one was shot by his mother, showing Marcus's belongings scattered on the ground, Walsh's hostile body language, and the neighbors watching in shock. The elderly woman from next door could be heard on the recording saying, "That is Colonel Hayes, he lives here. This is wrong." By midnight, the videos had 10,000 views. By 2 in the morning, 100,000. By sunrise, over 1 million people had watched Marcus Hayes being arrested in his own neighborhood. The comment section exploded with outrage. This is America in 2025. A decorated military officer, treated like a criminal in his own neighborhood. 22 years of service to his country, and this is how they treat him. That cop should be fired immediately. This is clearly racial profiling. I am a veteran, and this makes me sick. Colonel Hayes deserves better than this. The way he stayed calm while being humiliated shows more discipline than that cop will ever have. People began sharing the videos. News outlets picked up the story. By 6 in the morning, local television stations were reporting on it. By 7, national news networks were covering it. By 8, it was trending on social media platforms across the country. A reporter named Jennifer Martinez from Channel 7 News was one of the first to arrive at the police station. She set up her camera outside and went live just as the sun was rising. I am standing outside the Meadowbrook police station, where Colonel Marcus Hayes, a decorated United States Army officer, has been held overnight following what witnesses are calling a racially motivated arrest. Video footage that has now been viewed millions of times shows Colonel Hayes being stopped, searched, and arrested by Officer Derek Walsh, despite appearing to comply with all instructions. The charges are resisting arrest and disorderly conduct, though the video clearly shows no evidence of either offense. Inside the station, Chief Crawford was in his office watching the news reports. His face grew paler with each new story. His phone rang constantly. The mayor, city council members, community leaders, all of them demanding answers. All of them asking the same questions. Why was a colonel arrested? What was he charged with? Who was responsible? Crawford called in Walsh and his supervisor, Lieutenant Mark Stevens. Walsh still seemed confident that he had done nothing wrong. Stevens looked nervous. "Derek, walk me through exactly what happened," Crawford said, his voice tight. Walsh shrugged. "Simple traffic stop, Chief. He failed to signal. I pulled him over. He got hostile and defensive when I asked him questions. He refused to follow commands. I had probable cause to search the vehicle because I smelled marijuana. Did you find any marijuana? No, but that does not mean it was not there earlier. These people are good at hiding things. Crawford's eyes narrowed. These people? Walsh realized his mistake too late. I mean, suspects. People who are being investigated. The video shows him being completely cooperative, Crawford said. The video does not show everything. You cannot see his attitude, his tone, the way he was challenging my authority. Challenging your authority by telling you he is a colonel? Anyone can say they are a colonel. Anyone can get a fake ID. Crawford pulled out Marcus's military ID. Sergeant Wilson says this ID is authentic. He served in the army and knows what these look like. Walsh shifted uncomfortably. Wilson might be wrong. Or you might be wrong, Crawford said. Do you understand what is happening right now, Derek? This story is national news. We have had 50 phone calls in the last hour. The mayor is furious. The city council wants answers. And the video makes us look terrible. It makes you look terrible. It makes this entire department look terrible. I was doing my job, Walsh said defensively. Were you? Because from where I sit, it looks like you racially profiled a respected military officer, searched his car without real probable cause, found nothing illegal, and then arrested him on bogus charges because your ego could not handle being questioned. Walsh's face turned red. That is not what happened. Then what did happen? Explain to me how a routine traffic stop turned into this disaster. Before Walsh could answer, there was a knock on the door. Sergeant Wilson entered, looking grim. Chief, you need to see this. He held up a tablet showing more social media posts. Not just about Marcus's arrest. Posts about Walsh. People had looked into his background. They had found other stories. Other complaints. A pattern was emerging. Officer Walsh has had 12 complaints filed against him in the last 3 years, Wilson read from the screen. 8 of those complaints came from black citizens claiming racial profiling. None of the complaints were sustained. 2 were dismissed. The others are still pending review. Crawford looked at Walsh with new eyes. 12 complaints. How did I not know about this? Stevens spoke up for the first time. The complaints go through internal review first, Chief. Most of them did not have enough evidence to move forward. Or they were buried, Wilson said quietly but firmly. Sir, I have been reviewing the files this morning. Several of these complaints describe the same behavior we saw last night. Aggressive stops. Searches without clear probable cause. Arrests on minor charges that do not stick. And almost all of them involve black citizens. Walsh stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. I am being attacked because I do my job properly. These complaints are just people trying to get out of tickets and arrests. They play the race card every time. Sit down, Officer Walsh, Crawford ordered. You are on administrative leave effective immediately. Pending a full investigation. Badge and gun now. Walsh's mouth fell open. You cannot be serious. I'm completely serious. This is a disaster. Colonel Hayes is probably going to sue the department. The media is crucifying us. The mayor is breathing down my neck. And now I find out you have a history of complaints that nobody bothered to tell me about. Give me your badge and gun. Walsh slowly removed his badge and gun and placed them on Crawford's desk. His hands were shaking. This is wrong. I did nothing wrong. Get out of my office, Crawford said coldly. Walsh left, slamming the door behind him. Crawford rubbed his face with his hands. What a mess. What an absolute mess. What about Colonel Hayes? Wilson asked. He is still in holding. Release him immediately. Drop all charges and bring him to my office. I need to apologize personally. Marcus was escorted to Crawford's office 30 minutes later. He had not been allowed to shower or change. His clothes were wrinkled. His face showed the exhaustion of a sleepless night. But he walked with his head high and his shoulders back. Crawford stood when Marcus entered. Colonel Hayes, I am Chief Robert Crawford. I want to begin by offering my sincere apologies for what happened to you last night. All charges have been dropped. You are free to go. Marcus looked at him steadily. Thank you, Chief, but an apology does not erase what happened. It does not give me back the 18 hours I spent in a cell. It does not heal my injured wrists. It does not remove the humiliation of being arrested in front of my neighbors. You are absolutely right, and I want you to know that Officer Walsh has been placed on administrative leave. There will be a full investigation. Administrative leave is paid leave, Marcus said. He gets a vacation while I get trauma. Crawford had no good response to that. David Chen entered the office. "Chief Crawford, my client will be making a statement to the press shortly. I hope your department is prepared for the questions that will follow. We will cooperate fully with any investigation," Crawford said. Marcus turned to leave, then stopped. "Chief, how many other men like me have been arrested by Officer Walsh? How many of them did not have rank or education or neighbors with cameras? How many of them are still sitting in your jail right now on false charges because they could not prove their innocence?" Crawford looked down at his desk. He had no answer. Sarah and Jessica were waiting in the lobby when Marcus emerged. Sarah ran to him and hugged him tightly. Jessica, a college junior studying engineering, had tears running down her face. "Dad, I was so scared," Jessica whispered. "I am okay, baby girl. I'm okay." They walked outside into a wall of cameras and reporters. Jennifer Martinez pushed to the front. "Colonel Hayes, can you tell us what happened?" David Chen held up his hand. "Colonel Hayes will make a brief statement. No questions at this time." Marcus stood on the steps of the police station. The morning sun was bright. Behind him, the doors of the building loomed. In front of him, dozens of cameras and microphones waited. He thought about all the people watching, all the other black men and women who had gone through similar experiences, all the families who lived in fear of traffic stops, all the soldiers he commanded who looked up to him. He cleared his throat and spoke clearly and calmly. "My name is Colonel Marcus Hayes. I am a colonel in the United States Army with 22 years of service. Last night I was arrested 2 blocks from my home by Officer Derek Walsh of the Meadowbrook Police Department. I was pulled over for allegedly failing to signal, though I know I signaled properly. Officer Walsh was hostile from the beginning. He questioned why I was in my neighborhood. He suggested my car might be stolen. He refused to believe my military identification was real. He searched my car without proper probable cause and found nothing illegal. When I politely stated my rights, I was arrested for resisting arrest and disorderly conduct. Even though I did not resist and I was not disorderly, I spent 18 hours in a cell for crimes I did not commit." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I am standing here today because I have rank. I have education. I have resources. I have neighbors who recorded what happened. But how many others do not have these things? How many young black men have been arrested by officers like Derek Walsh and had no way to prove their innocence? How many families have been torn apart by false arrests and unfair treatment? This is not just about me. This is about a system that allows officers like Walsh to continue working, despite multiple complaints. This is about accountability. This is about justice. This is about treating every citizen with dignity and respect, regardless of the color of their skin." His voice grew stronger. "I served my country for over 2 decades. I led soldiers in combat. I earned medals for bravery. I taught young men and women about honor and duty and sacrifice. And last night in my own neighborhood, I was treated like a criminal. Not because I did anything wrong, but because of the color of my skin and the prejudice of one officer who should never have been given a badge." The reporters were silent, hanging on every word. "I am calling for Officer Derek Walsh to be fired. Not suspended. Fired. I am calling for a full review of all his previous arrests and complaints. I am calling for changes in how this police department handles complaints of racial profiling. And I am calling for every officer in every department to remember that they serve all citizens. Not just some, all." He stepped back from the microphones. David Chen led him toward their car. But as he walked, something happened. People began to applaud. First a few neighbors who had gathered to watch. Then more than dozens. They clapped for his dignity, his courage, his refusal to be silent. Marcus got into the car with his family. As they drove away, he saw the crowd growing. People holding signs. Justice for Colonel Hayes. Fire Walsh. Black Lives Matter. A movement had begun. And it all started with one video on a quiet street in a suburban neighborhood. The investigation into Officer Derek Walsh began within hours of Marcus's press conference. The video had been viewed over 5 million times by noon. News outlets across the country were running the story. Social media was on fire with hashtags like Justice for Colonel Hayes and Fire Walsh. The pressure on the Meadowbrook Police Department was intense and growing by the hour. Chief Crawford knew he had to act decisively. He called in Lieutenant Rachel Morrison from Internal Affairs. Morrison was known for being thorough and fair. She had built her reputation on not backing down from difficult investigations, even when they involved fellow officers. I need you to investigate Officer Walsh, Crawford told her. Leave no stone unturned. I want to know everything. Every stop. Every arrest. Every complaint, everything. Morrison nodded. I will need full access to all records, including ones that were dismissed or pending. You have it. Whatever you need. Morrison assembled a team and got to work immediately. They started with Walsh's personnel file. What they found was troubling. Derek Walsh had been with the Meadowbrook Police Department for 8 years. His performance reviews were mostly average, with a few notes about being overly aggressive during arrests. His training record showed he had been required to take additional courses on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation techniques twice, both times after complaints. The team pulled up every complaint filed against Walsh. There were 12 in total over 3 years, just as Sergeant Wilson had reported. But as Morrison dug deeper, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The first complaint came from a black woman named Angela Brown. She was pulled over for a broken taillight. Walsh had searched her car, claiming he smelled marijuana. He found nothing. Angela filed a complaint saying Walsh was rude and treated her like a criminal for no reason. The complaint was dismissed as unsubstantiated. The second complaint was from a Hispanic man named Carlos Mendez. Similar story. Traffic stop. Aggressive questioning. Search without clear cause. Nothing found. Complaint dismissed. The third was from a young black man named Jamal Turner. He was walking home from work at night. Walsh stopped him, demanding to know what he was doing in the neighborhood. Jamal explained he worked at a restaurant nearby. Walsh did not believe him. He searched Jamal, finding nothing illegal, but issued him a citation for jaywalking. Complaint dismissed. On and on the list went. Morrison noticed something else. Every complaint that involved a white citizen had been investigated more thoroughly. Several had resulted in verbal warnings for Walsh, but complaints from black and Hispanic citizens were quickly dismissed with minimal investigation. This is systematic, Morrison told her team. Someone has been protecting Walsh and covering up these complaints. She pulled the records on who had handled each internal review. Most had been reviewed by Lieutenant Mark Stevens, Walsh's direct supervisor. Stevens had dismissed 8 of the 12 complaints. He had marked them as lacking evidence or citizen credibility issues. Morrison brought Stevens in for questioning. Lieutenant Stevens, I am reviewing the complaints against Officer Walsh. I see you handled most of the internal reviews. Can you explain your process? Stevens shifted in his seat. He was a thin man in his late 40s with thinning hair and nervous energy. I followed standard procedure. I interviewed the officer. I reviewed available evidence. I made my determination based on the facts. Did you interview the complainants? In some cases. Which cases? Stevens hesitated. I do not recall specifically. Morrison pulled out a file. According to these records, you interviewed complainants in 3 of the 8 cases you reviewed. All 3 of those complainants were white. The 5 cases involving black or Hispanic complainants show no record of interviews. That must be an oversight in the paperwork, or it is a pattern of dismissing complaints from minority citizens without proper investigation. Stevens's face reddened. I resent that implication. I'm not implying anything, Lieutenant. I am stating what the records show. You dismissed complaints without interviewing the people who filed them. You accepted Officer Walsh's version of events without question, and you allowed a pattern of behavior to continue unchecked. Walsh is a good officer. He just has an aggressive style sometimes. Aggressive with whom, Lieutenant? Because from what I am seeing, his aggressive style is directed primarily at black and Hispanic citizens. Stevens had no good answer. Morrison's team also reviewed Walsh's body camera footage. This was perhaps the most damning evidence. The cameras showed his behavior during traffic stops over the past year. When stopping white drivers, Walsh was professional and polite. He explained the reason for the stop. He was patient when drivers asked questions. He rarely searched vehicles. When stopping black or Hispanic drivers, his demeanor changed completely. He was immediately suspicious. His questions were accusatory. He looked for reasons to extend the stop. He searched vehicles at a much higher rate, and his body language was aggressive and intimidating. One video showed Walsh stopping a young black man for having an air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror. The stop lasted 45 minutes. Walsh called for backup. He searched the entire vehicle. He ran the driver's name through multiple databases. He found nothing illegal. but still issued 3 citations for minor infractions. Another video showed Walsh stopping a white woman for running a red light. The stop lasted 4 minutes. Walsh gave her a warning and sent her on her way with a smile. The statistical analysis was equally damning. Morrison's team calculated that Walsh stopped black drivers at a rate 3 times higher than white drivers in his patrol area. He searched black drivers' vehicles at a rate 5 times higher, and he arrested black citizens at a rate 4 times higher, with a much lower conviction rate on those arrests. These numbers do not lie, Morrison told Chief Crawford. Walsh has been racially profiling for years, and it was allowed to continue because complaints were dismissed without proper investigation. Crawford looked at the report with a heavy heart. What about the Colonel Hayes arrest? Anything specific there? Morrison pulled out another file. Walsh's written report contradicts the video evidence in multiple ways. He wrote that Colonel Hayes was nervous and evasive. The video shows him being calm and direct. He wrote that Hayes refused to provide identification. The video shows Hayes providing his license and military ID immediately. He wrote that he smelled marijuana, giving him probable cause to search. Multiple witnesses say the car windows were up and Walsh could not have smelled anything from outside the vehicle. So he lied in his official report. Yes, multiple times. That is falsifying police documents, which is a criminal offense. Crawford rubbed his temples. What else? We reviewed the dash camera footage from Officer Patterson's vehicle. He was one of the backup officers. His camera shows Walsh telling him and Officer Rodriguez that Hayes was being aggressive and threatening. But then his camera also shows Walsh admitting that Hayes did not physically resist arrest. Walsh told his fellow officers to back up his story about Hayes being hostile. He tried to get other officers to lie. It appears that way. Officer Rodriguez looked very uncomfortable during that conversation. Officer Patterson said nothing but looked concerned. Morrison had also conducted interviews with Walsh's fellow officers. Most were careful in what they said. The police union had sent out a memo advising members not to speak negatively about Walsh. But a few officers spoke up. Rodriguez, the younger Hispanic officer who had been at the scene, was the most forthcoming. I knew something was wrong that night, Rodriguez admitted. I watched the dash cam footage on the way to the stop. Colonel Hayes used his turn signal clearly. There was no reason for the stop. When we arrived, Hayes was being completely cooperative. He was not aggressive at all. But Walsh kept escalating things. I wanted to say something, but Walsh is senior to me. And I have seen what happens to officers who question him. What happens? Morrison asked. They get labeled as troublemakers. They get the worst assignments. Walsh has friends in the department who protect him. It is easier to just go along. This revelation troubled Morrison deeply. It suggested that the problem was not just Walsh. It was a culture within the department that protected bad officers and intimidated good ones. Meanwhile, outside the police station, protests were growing. They started small on the second day. About 50 people gathered with signs demanding justice. By the third day, there were 200 people. By the fifth day, over 1,000. The protests were peaceful but loud. People chanted "No justice, no peace" and "Fire Walsh now." Community leaders spoke through megaphones. Veterans in uniform stood in solidarity. College students organized. Church groups prayed. The diverse crowd made it clear this was not just about one man. It was about a broken system. Marcus attended one of the protests on the fourth day. He did not plan to speak, but the crowd recognized him when he arrived. They began chanting his name. He was moved by their support. Eventually, he took the microphone. "I want to thank all of you for being here," Marcus said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "Your support means more than you know. But this is not about me anymore. This is about every person who has been mistreated by someone who abused their authority. This is about change, real change. Not just firing one officer, but transforming how police departments operate." The crowd erupted in applause. The police union responded by holding their own press conference. The union president, a heavy-set officer named Tom Brennan, defended Walsh. Officer Walsh is a dedicated law enforcement professional who has served this community for 8 years. He followed proper procedures during the stop in question. The rush to judgment against him is unfair and dangerous. We stand by our officer. Reporters immediately challenged him. How do you explain the video evidence showing Walsh being aggressive when Colonel Hayes was cooperative? The video does not show everything. It does not show what Officer Walsh observed and experienced. What about the 12 complaints against Walsh? The pattern of stops involving minority citizens? Complaints are often filed by people trying to avoid consequences for their actions. Officer Walsh patrols areas with higher crime rates. Of course, his statistics will reflect the demographics of those areas. The union's defense of Walsh only increased public anger. Social media exploded with criticism. More people joined the protests. Local businesses began putting up signs supporting Colonel Hayes. The mayor, Susan Chen, finally stepped in. She called a special city council meeting to discuss the situation. Marcus was invited to speak. So was Chief Crawford. So was a representative from the police union. The council chamber was packed. Every seat was filled. People stood along the walls. Cameras lined the back of the room. Marcus testified first. He recounted his experience calmly and clearly. He showed the medical records documenting his wrist injuries from the handcuffs. He presented character references from military commanders and fellow officers. He spoke about his years of service and his belief in justice. "I am not asking for special treatment because I am a colonel," Marcus concluded. "I am asking for equal treatment because I am a human being. I am asking for a system that holds officers accountable when they abuse their power. I am asking for a police department that serves all citizens with dignity and respect." The council members nodded. Several looked moved by his testimony. Chief Crawford testified next. He admitted that the department had failed. He acknowledged that complaints against Walsh had not been properly investigated. He promised reforms including better training, stricter oversight, and an outside review board for complaints. The union representative testified last. He repeated the same defenses, but his words rang hollow after Marcus's testimony and Crawford's admissions. The mayor spoke after all testimony was complete. "What happened to Colonel Hayes is unacceptable. It is a stain on our city. It is a violation of everything we claim to stand for. Officer Derek Walsh will not return to duty. The investigation will continue, and if the evidence supports termination, he will be fired. Furthermore, Lieutenant Mark Stevens will be removed from his supervisory position, pending investigation, into his handling of complaints. We will also establish an independent civilian review board to investigate all future complaints of police misconduct." The chamber erupted in applause. Walsh sat in his home watching the council meeting on television. His wife had left 3 days earlier, taking their 2 children to her mother's house. His phone kept ringing with calls from reporters. His neighbors avoided eye contact when they saw him. His friends from the department had stopped answering his calls. He watched Marcus testify with growing resentment. This was all Hayes' fault, Walsh thought. If Hayes had just accepted the ticket and moved on, none of this would have happened. Walsh refused to see his own role in creating this disaster. He refused to acknowledge his prejudice, his aggression, his abuse of power, but the evidence did not care what Walsh believed. The investigation was complete. The recommendation was clear. Derek Walsh should be terminated from the Meadowbrook Police Department for conduct unbecoming an officer, falsifying reports, racial profiling, and abuse of authority. The police review board would meet in 1 week to make the final decision. But everyone already knew what that decision would be. Walsh's career in law enforcement was over, and it was his own fault. The police review board met on a Thursday morning. The meeting room was smaller than the city council chamber, but just as packed. Media crews filled every available space. Community members lined the walls. Marcus sat in the front row with Sarah and his lawyer David Chen. Across the aisle sat Derek Walsh with his union representative and his own lawyer. The review board consisted of 5 members. 3 were senior police officials. 2 were civilian appointees with backgrounds in law and civil rights. The board chair was Deputy Chief Helen Martinez, a respected veteran with 30 years of experience. Martinez called the meeting to order. "We are here to review the internal affairs investigation into Officer Derek Walsh and to determine appropriate disciplinary action. Lieutenant Morrison, please present your findings." Morrison stood and walked to the front. She had prepared a detailed presentation. For the next hour, she methodically laid out the evidence, the video footage, the body camera recordings, the statistical analysis, the pattern of complaints, the falsified reports, the witness testimony. Walsh sat stone-faced through most of it, but his hands clenched and unclenched in his lap. His lawyer took notes furiously. When Morrison finished, Martinez turned to Walsh. "Officer Walsh, you have the right to respond to these findings." Walsh's lawyer stood. Board members, my client maintains that he acted appropriately during the stop in question. He had reasonable suspicion to conduct the traffic stop. He had probable cause to search the vehicle. And he had justification to make an arrest when the subject became resistant. The video clearly shows Colonel Hayes was not resistant, one of the civilian board members said. Video does not capture everything, sir. It does not show tone of voice, body language, the officer's experience and training that allows him to detect suspicious behavior. It shows Officer Walsh lying in his report. Morrison interjected. It shows him claiming Colonel Hayes refused to provide identification when the video clearly shows him providing it immediately. It shows Walsh claiming probable cause that could not have existed. The lawyer tried another angle. Officer Walsh has 8 years of service. He has made hundreds of arrests. He has received commendations. One controversial stop should not destroy his career. It is not one stop, Morrison said firmly. It is a pattern spanning years. A pattern that was ignored and covered up by inadequate supervision. The board members conferred quietly among themselves. Then Martinez spoke. Officer Walsh, would you like to address the board directly? Walsh stood slowly. His face was red. His jaw was tight. Yes, ma'am. I would like to say that I have always done my job to the best of my ability. I patrol difficult areas. I deal with dangerous situations. Sometimes I have to make split-second decisions. I am not perfect. But I am not a racist. I do not deserve to have my career destroyed because one man with a camera made me look bad. The words hung in the air. Several board members frowned. Marcus shook his head slowly. Officer Walsh, one of the civilian members, said, Have you reviewed the statistical analysis? The data showing you stop and search black citizens at rates significantly higher than white citizens. Those statistics do not mean anything. I patrol areas with higher crime rates. The demographics of my stops reflect the demographics of crime in those areas. What about the body camera footage showing you being professional with white drivers but aggressive with black drivers in similar situations? Walsh hesitated. I treat each situation differently based on what I observe. And what you observe is influenced by the race of the driver, the board member said. It was not a question. Walsh had no good answer. He sat down. Martinez looked at her notes. Then she looked at Walsh. Officer Walsh, this board has reviewed all the evidence. We have listened to testimony from multiple witnesses. We have examined your record thoroughly. The pattern is clear and disturbing. You have consistently demonstrated bias in your policing. You have falsified official reports. You have shown poor judgment and worse behavior. Most importantly, you have violated the trust that is essential between law enforcement and the community we serve. She paused, letting her words sink in. It is the unanimous decision of this board that Officer Derek Walsh be terminated from the Meadowbrook Police Department, effective immediately. The room erupted. Supporters of Marcus applauded. Media members rushed to file their reports. Walsh sat frozen in his chair, his face pale. Furthermore, Martinez continued, raising her voice over the noise. We recommend that the district attorney review this case for potential criminal charges, including filing false police reports and civil rights violations. We also recommend that Officer Walsh's certification be revoked, preventing him from serving in law enforcement in any capacity in the future. Walsh's lawyer stood to protest, but Martinez cut him off. This meeting is adjourned. The gavel came down with finality. Marcus sat quietly as chaos erupted around him. Sarah squeezed his hand. It is over, she whispered, but Marcus knew it was not over. Justice in this one case did not erase the larger problems. It did not fix the system that had allowed Walsh to continue for years. It did not help all the other people who had been victims of similar abuse. Outside the building, Marcus gave another press conference. The crowd was huge. Veterans in uniform stood behind him. Community leaders flanked him. The support was overwhelming. Today, Derek Walsh was fired, Marcus began. Justice was served in this one case. But this is just a beginning, not an ending. Walsh was able to continue his behavior for years because the system protected him. Complaints were dismissed. Warning signs were ignored. Other officers were afraid to speak up. That system must change. He outlined specific reforms he would be advocating for. Independent review boards for all complaints. Better training on implicit bias and de-escalation. Body cameras required for all officers with footage publicly accessible. Real consequences for officers who file false reports or engage in racial profiling. I do not want to demonize all police officers, Marcus said. Most officers are good people doing a difficult job. But the bad ones taint everyone. The ones who abuse their power make it harder for good officers to do their work. The ones who lie in their reports undermine trust in the entire system. We must hold them accountable, not protect them. The crowd cheered. Over the following weeks, the fallout continued. Lieutenant Mark Stevens was demoted and transferred to a desk job. He would retire quietly 6 months later. The police union president who had defended Walsh faced a challenge to his leadership and eventually stepped down. The district attorney did file criminal charges against Walsh. He was charged with filing false police reports and deprivation of rights under color of law. His lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor was not interested. The case would go to trial. Walsh lost his house when he could not make the mortgage payments without his police salary. His wife filed for divorce. His friends from the department stopped calling. He took a job working security at a shopping mall, but he was fired after 2 weeks when customers complained about his aggressive behavior. He became bitter and angry, posting rants on social media about how he was the real victim. Nobody believed him. Meanwhile, Marcus was promoted to full colonel in a ceremony at Fort Carson. Major General Thompson presided. The ceremony was attended by local officials, including Mayor Susan Chen and the new police chief who had replaced Crawford when he retired. In his acceptance speech, Marcus spoke about service and duty and the responsibility that comes with authority. Rank and position are not rewards, he said. They are responsibilities. They require us to be better than we think we can be, to lead by example, to treat every person with dignity, to stand up for what is right even when it is difficult. I learned these lessons in the Army, but they apply everywhere. They apply to police officers and teachers and judges and anyone who holds power over others. He looked out at the audience.
What happened to me should not have happened.
But I had resources that many others do not have. I had rank that commanded attention. I had a supportive family and good lawyer and neighbors who recorded evidence. Most victims of police abuse do not have those advantages. So I will use my privilege and my platform to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. The applause was thunderous. Marcus began speaking at police academies and community forums. He talked about his experience openly and honestly. He did not sugarcoat the fear he felt that night. He did not pretend he was not angry about what happened. But he also talked about paths forward, about building trust, about reform. Some officers resented his criticism of law enforcement. They saw him as attacking all police because of one bad officer. But many others listened and learned. They recognized the truth in his words. They understood that accountability made them safer and more effective. The Meadowbrook Police Department implemented the reforms Mayor Chen had promised. The Independent Civilian Review Board was established. All officers received new training. Body camera policies were strengthened. And importantly, the culture began to change. Officers who witnessed misconduct were encouraged to report it. Complaints were investigated thoroughly regardless of who filed them. The department also reached out to Marcus, asking him to help train officers on community relations. He agreed, but on one condition. He wanted to bring other victims of police abuse to share their stories too. People who did not have his rank or resources. People whose experiences had been dismissed or ignored. The department agreed. Marcus met with a young black man named Jamal Turner, one of the people who had filed complaints against Walsh years earlier. Jamal had been stopped while walking home from work. Walsh had searched him and cited him for jaywalking. The complaint was dismissed. I am sorry that happened to you, Marcus said when they met, and I am sorry your complaint was not taken seriously. Jamal looked at him with a mix of emotions. You got justice because you are a colonel. I am just a cook at a restaurant. Nobody cared what happened to me. I care, and I want to make sure what happened to both of us does not happen to anyone else. Will you help me? Jamal agreed. He and Marcus and several others began speaking at police trainings together. They shared their stories. They put human faces on statistics. They made officers understand the real impact of racial profiling and police abuse. Slowly, things began to change. Walsh's trial took place 6 months after his firing. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding him guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison and 5 years probation. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. On the day of sentencing, Marcus was in court. Walsh looked at him across the courtroom with hatred in his eyes. But Marcus looked back with something different. Not hatred, not even anger, just sadness for what Walsh had thrown away and what he had put others through. After the sentencing, reporters asked Marcus how he felt. "I feel that justice was served," he said. "But I also feel sad. Derek Walsh could have been a good officer if he had dealt with his biases and treated people with respect. Instead, he destroyed his own life and hurt many others. That is tragic, but necessary. Accountability matters." A year after his arrest, Marcus received an award from a national civil rights organization. The ceremony was in Washington, D.C. Important politicians and activists attended. When Marcus took the stage to accept the award, he brought Sarah and Jessica with him. "I accept this award not for myself," Marcus said, "but on behalf of every person who has been mistreated by those who abuse their authority. Every person who has been stopped for no reason. Every person who has been searched illegally. Every person who has been arrested on false charges. Every person whose complaints were dismissed or ignored. This is for them," he held up the award. "And this is also for the good officers. The ones who do their jobs with integrity. The ones who treat everyone with dignity. The ones who speak up when they see wrongdoing. The ones who understand that the badge is a responsibility, not a license to abuse power. We need more officers like that. We need to support them and elevate them and make sure their voices are heard above those who would tarnish the profession." The crowd gave him a standing ovation. 2 years after his arrest, Marcus retired from the Army. He had served 24 years. He had earned his rest. But retirement for Marcus did not mean stopping work. It meant changing the focus of his work. He started a nonprofit organization dedicated to police reform and supporting victims of police abuse. The organization provided legal assistance to people who could not afford lawyers. It monitored police departments and held them accountable. It advocated for better training and stricter oversight. The organization was called Badge and Dignity, reflecting Marcus's belief that law enforcement and human dignity should go hand in hand. Sarah continued her work at the hospital. Jessica graduated from college and became an engineer. She also became an activist, using her voice to demand change in her own generation. Derek Walsh served his time in prison. When he was released, he disappeared from public view. Some said he moved to another state. Some said he was working in construction. Some said he was still bitter and angry, blaming everyone but himself for what had happened. Nobody cared anymore. Walsh was not important. He was a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when prejudice and power combine, a symbol of a system that had protected bad officers for too long. The important story was not about Walsh's downfall. It was about the changes that followed. The Meadowbrook Police Department became a model for reform. Other departments studied their policies and implemented similar changes. The Civilian Review Board proved effective at investigating complaints fairly. Trust between the police and the community slowly began to rebuild. It was not perfect. There were still problems, still incidents, still work to be done, but it was better, and better was progress. Marcus knew the fight for justice was never finished. Every generation had to take up the work, had to demand accountability, had to stand up for what was right. He had done his part. But the next generation would have to continue the work. He thought about that night often. The night he was arrested in his own neighborhood. The fear and humiliation, the anger and frustration, the 18 hours in a cell. But he also thought about what came after. The support of his community. The courage of the neighbors who recorded the truth. The dedication of people like Lieutenant Morrison who investigated thoroughly. The protesters who demanded justice. The reformers who pushed for change. One bad officer had tried to break him, but a community had lifted him up. That was the real story. That was the lesson he wanted to teach. On the anniversary of his arrest, Marcus drove down Elm Street, the same street where Walsh had pulled him over. He drove slowly, signaling carefully at every turn. He looked at the houses where his neighbors had stood watching, where they had recorded evidence, where they had demanded justice. He pulled over at the exact spot where he had been arrested. He got out of his car and stood there for a moment, remembering, reflecting. Then he looked up at the sky and smiled. He had survived. He had fought back. He had made a difference. And that, he thought, was what service really meant. Not just wearing a uniform, not just following orders, but standing up for justice, speaking truth to power, making the world a little bit better for those who would come after. He got back in his car and drove home. Sarah was making dinner. Jessica was visiting for the weekend. Life was good. Justice had been served. And the work continued. That was enough.